Hi everyone and welcome to today's digital piano comparison. We have got, wait for it, Kawai's ES8 versus its replacement, the Kawai ES920. This is a video I've wanted to make for a long time, and it took a little while to get two in the same room, but we've done it today. We're going to be comparing its action, talking about the differences, if any, in its action, but most importantly, comparing the onboard tone, which really is the crux of where this upgrade just blows away the ES8. It's super surprised. So I'm gonna get into more of that in just a few minutes, but thank you so much for joining us. If it's the first time that you have found us here on YouTube, we would really love for you to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can come back again and again, enjoy more piano videos, learn all about pianos hopefully, and kind of be entertained along the way. We try and make these as fun and as informative as possible. So without further ado, let's get started with this in-depth comparison of Kawai's ES8 and its replacement, the Kawai ES920. First start by saying that this was not the easiest video to coordinate. There was a large gap between when Kawai stopped producing the ES8 and when they actually started shipping the ES920. And as a result of that, it was hard to track an ES8 down in order to compare it to an ES920. And it actually took a customer who had recently got the ES8, realizing that they had actually really wanted the ES920, to trade it in for an ES920 for us to have one on the floor. And that's exactly what's happened now. And so we're now able to make a video that I've been wanting to make for a long time, which is a side-by-side comparison between these two instruments. I've reviewed this ES8 on its own. I reviewed the ES920 on its own and in comparison to the 520. But side by side, playing them for the first time really was quite eye-opening. And I think it's going to be equally eye-opening to you. I have read a variety of commentary and people opining on the ES920, and there certainly is a camp that's super impressed with the instrument. There's another camp that's sort of saying, well, you know, this doesn't feel like it's all that much different than the ES8. Depending on what you're looking for in the instrument, this video is either not going to address your concern at all, or it could very much put the issue to rest. Because on a playability musical level, I think there's a big difference between these two. And we've set the video up in a way that I hope that's going to come through to you at home. We are recording both with line outs as well as stereo microphones. So we'll be going back and forth so you can hear the difference in signal, but you can also hear the difference in speaker. And that's a big deal because there's a huge difference in the onboard sound output between these two instruments. Honestly, it's not even close. If you thought the difference between the old FP30 and the new FP30X was dramatic, this one is extreme. And that is probably the thing that I was expecting the least when I got these two side by side. I thought I would be straining to hear a difference between the speakers because my impression of the ES8 had always been that its onboard speaker system was class leading, or at least that's kind of how I felt when I was playing it. And so when I sat down for the ES920 for the first time, like, yeah, kind of sounds like an ES8. Well, the memory is a funny thing. And so let's get these two playing side by side on the flagship sounds and let you really hear what the differences are. Now, before we start doing that, let's talk about the guts inside these two instruments, because there are a lot in common between these two pianos. But you'd be missing the forest for the trees if you skipped over a couple of critical elements here. One, they both use the harmonic imaging XL, so the fundamental sound chip isn't different. And so if you looked at that and go, well, okay, so why is this, you know, a new thing? You'd perhaps have skipped over the fact that the ES920 is using a brand new motherboard design which was co-developed by Onkyo, which means even though the core tone might be the same between the two, there's all sorts of post-signal processing that's happening on the ES920 that the ES8 just doesn't get. The second thing we're going to be hearing is the difference between speakers, and it's not just the size of speakers, which is meaningful. We've got a pair of 15 watts on the ES8, we've got a pair of 20 watts on the ES920, but these are Onkyo speakers as well as Onkyo amplifiers, if I'm not mistaken. We don't have any of that happening on the ES8. So speakers, amplifiers, post-processing, all are different and beefier on the ES920. So now that I go back and I dig further and like, okay, why is there such a big difference? This shouldn't have been that big a surprise, but it's pretty dramatic. I'm going to play the ES8 first. This is on the default SK Concert Grand setting. It is, if you can see on the camera, exactly 50% volume. And you are going to be hearing both signal line out on its own, but then you are going to hear the speakers through these microphones. The sound is completely unaffected. There's no EQ that's been applied to this. There's no reverb that's been applied to it. No compression of any kind. This is just the raw sound out of the ES8. I'm going to play as close to exactly the same thing as I can on the ES920 at the same volume level on the same core tone, which is the SK EX Concert Grand. So let's have a listen. Just listen to the lower octaves. It's kind of an interesting polytonal sound. You got your D triad over top of an A major. Somehow it works. You know, upper harmonics have a tendency to make funky things sound good all the time. Shoot, I just gave away my entire musical secret. There's a huge difference in the clarity of the sound, the fullness of the sound, and the power of the sound. It really honestly isn't even close. And for what I kind of thought was the centerpiece to the ES8's performance, which was the quality of its onboard speakers, to be so thoroughly blown away by the ES920 is pretty impressive. For everybody who had loved the ES8 for the fact that it did have such a present full tone for a portable instrument, you are going to like exactly the same thing about the ES920, but on steroids. I'm not over-dramatizing how big a difference this is with me sitting in front of these two sets of speakers. There's a huge V on here. There's just like complete missing parts of the spectrum when I'm hearing it against this, which is just so crazy because the first time I heard the ES8, I thought, oh my God, finally a full tone. Funny how quickly things change. So we have the same tone engine. We've already talked about that, but we've got a difference in speaker amp and speaker quality and just the level of wattage that both have. They both have 256 notes of polyphony. That hasn't changed. They both use the RH3 hammer action. However, this is using the second generation RH3 hammer action, so completely redesigned sensor strip, even more accurate. It does also have the escapement or the let off, as some companies call it. I actually think Kawai uses the term let off. Yes, they do. I had to look at the sticker. Let off versus escapement, but you know, other companies may use the word escapement. We've done a video on that if you want to know what the heck I'm talking about when I say let off or escapement. Pretty crazy. Besides that, what else are we getting from a sound generation standpoint that's different? Well, we have 3 more sounds. I think this is 34 tones, this is 37 tones, more or less the same. We've got the SK-EX sample set, the SK5 sample set, and the EX sample set. Some people prefer the EX over the SK. I happen to like the SK more because I really enjoy complex, thicker sound, and the SK is definitely a more colorful tone. When I say that, it's not like a subjective thing. There actually are more partials happening on the SK-EX sample set versus the EX. It's a little cleaner and it's a little brighter. Sounds to me closer to like almost a bit of a Yamaha sound with the EX sound. Anyway. They both still preserve their amp simulator on there to affect the tone, so that really hasn't changed. They both still have exactly the same rhythms, and the way in which you use the rhythm section is exactly the same. And a lot of the samples have not undergone any kind of improvement. So unlike Roland, where they brought out a new chip, and when they brought out the new chip, they also decided to enhance the algorithmic programming behind those tones. This is the same. But I'm now hearing more detail in the sound. So even though the signal on the way out is going to be somewhat similar, man, those speakers are presenting the detail in quite, it's just so present. Can't tell you how different that is. Same sounds, rendered just with more detail. And I think that's entirely because of the post-processing and the improved speaker system. We're going to move on to a discussion about the action. Thank you so much for being with us. Hope you're enjoying this side-by-side comparison with the ES8 and its replacement, the Kawai ES920. Thanks so much. Now, a discussion between two instruments that on paper use the same action would be a pretty boring section normally, but this is an important one. The first generation of ES8 had a fairly well-known problem. I don't know if Kawai ever publicly acknowledged that it was there, but early owners of ES8, some were lucky, didn't experience any problems. Others had issues with the sensor strip, and Kawai wound up completely redesigning the whole circuitry on how that triple sensor was delivering data to the soundboard, and also updated how that the main motherboard was sending that to the tone generator. So there were some significant architectural changes made between the ES8 moving up to the ES920. So for anybody out there thinking to themselves, well, I love everything about the ES8, but I heard that there were some action issues with some of those things. That seems to have been kind of not just band-aided, but completely redesigned with the ES920. In fact, the last few runs of the ES8 also had that kind of redesigned, but that slipped under the radar for the most part and didn't really receive a lot of attention. Kawai didn't release a lot of information. I only knew about it through back channels, through some contacts at Kawai that were talking about how to recognize the fact that the sensor strip was completely different, talking to some parts guys, talking to some repair people who were seeing what Kawai was doing with this. So this is not the same RH3 that you're going to find in your first generation of the ES8. But let's talk about the RH3 generally, aside from that. This is, as we said, it's a triple sensor. What triple sensors are good for is in really staccato playing, in a lot of fairly, violent playing, where you're attacking the key with a fast repetition. The triple sensor can really help to make sure that you're not going to get any MIDI spikes, missed notes. Just improves the accuracy when there's a high degree of repetition going on. It also helps to improve the accuracy generally of the MIDI output. And Kawai makes a great triple sensor. The triple sensor that they've got on the VPC-1, which is their virtual controller, is epically accurate. It's a favorite for people who really are looking for a beautiful weighted instrument in a studio setting. And all they're looking for is a trigger, and they're using it a lot for, say, acoustic piano tracking without the acoustic piano. Even Ravenscroft was using their version of the VPC-1 to kind of create a digital version of their, was it a 278? Ravenscroft 278? Hope I have that right. Anyway, so that is the RH3 action with the triple sensor. It's got escapement, as I mentioned. And I'm going to kill the volume now and just let you hear both what it sounds like, the mechanical sound, as well. I'll give you a sample of the repetition speed. So here is the sound of the RH3. And I made mention of this, and have made mention of this in quite a few Roland and Yamaha videos, that the Kawai is sort of opposite to the Roland in that the downstroke is not even close to as loud as the Roland, but the release of the Kawai is a lot louder than the Roland. So it's all in where the differences in the geometry, the differences in the action. A very good reminder that one action is not the same as the other, and manufacturers really do have quite meaningful differences, not just in construction quality, but design between these two, or between actions. The RH3 has a bit of a bounce on return. That's perfectly normal, not just for Kawai, but for anything. You see the same thing in acoustic pianos. So I know I see people sometimes commenting on various brands online about, well, does it have a bounce on the way back? Various acoustic pianos also have a bounce on the return. Not all of them do, but some of them do and some of them don't. And it has nothing to do with price point, it has nothing to do with quality. It's entirely how they set up the geometry of the action, and just where they, they're weighting it a little bit differently, and the return speed and all of that kind of stuff. So you'll see it on $100,000 pianos, you'll see it on $10,000 pianos. You won't see it on $100,000 pianos and $10,000 pianos. So it's neither good nor bad. It's just an artifact of the geometry they've decided to use. And let's turn the volume back up and we'll get a sense of the repetition speed for people where this is the very first look at the ES920. So that's all for action. We're going to be back with a third comparison. We're going to talk about the functionality. We will touch on the auto arranger as well, which is present on both the ES8 and the current ES920, and connectivity. So thanks so much for being with us once again. We will be back in just a second. So there are some important differences in connectivity between the 920 and people who knew or have the ES8. One, the ES8 would support a double pedal floating or the triple pedal as part of its included stand. The ES920, on the other hand, will support a floating triple pedal or the built-in triple pedal board, which comes with the integrated stand. So a little bit different in terms of the pedals that it supports. They both have 1/4-inch outputs, which is great, and they both have line inputs, which is also quite handy. Now, Bluetooth on the ES920 is a major upgrade and update to the ES8. ES8 had no Bluetooth of any kind, so you had to kind of use this wired connection to manage the ES8. ES920 has Bluetooth MIDI as well as Bluetooth audio, so you can stream audio to this 920 and make use of this absolutely brilliant onboard speaker system, which I would highly recommend that you do. It sounds great. If you've got this in a dorm room, if you've got this in a bedroom, these are good enough that you really honestly can use this as a stereo and not be wanting for more, provided that the room is not gigantic. So the Bluetooth audio and the Bluetooth MIDI, that's a difference. They both have USB recording, and Kawai is one of the few companies, maybe the only company, who allows you to actually record MP3 and WAV audio as well as playback MP3 and WAV audio off the USB. Now, with the advent of more instruments, having USB interfaces built in, or people just having home recording USB interfaces available to run the 1/4-inch there. This, I don't think, is quite as critical as it used to be, but I can still see this being incredibly useful for educators who are going to make quick practice tracks. They don't want to have to throw this stuff into a DAW and export it and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you just record very, very quickly here. You hand it to your student. Okay, there's your exercises for the week. I could see that being pretty handy. Other thing is, obviously, with the playback of the MP3, you could create your own backing tracks offline and then be performing over very complex backing tracks live as a part of a performance or as a part of a gig. So certainly there's application there, because then you don't have to have a laptop completely wired up and all of that. So lots of places where this is still quite useful, and I like that they have moved this really to the front. And because they buried it, it protects the USB key. I have probably on at least 3 occasions completely snapped USB keys in half because I forgot they were plugged into some port, and I wound up slamming my hand down in that area, either as part of a playing or forgot it was there and was moving it around, and your USB key is completely bunged up. So this protects it in a nice way. Both came with music stands, so not much different there. Let's take a quick look at the rhythm section so you can hear and see the similarities, and in this case really are mostly just similarities. So on the rhythm section, let's do Funk Shuffle 1, Kawai Classic. And over here, kind of sound the same, pretty easy to use, and fairly functional. So that's more or less how you've got the accompaniment section working. You've got 100 different rhythms that go back and forth between a primary and a variation, and then you've got the ability to select your accompaniment mode, 1-finger chord, preset chord, or normal. And then you can turn on and off different elements of the rhythm section pretty easily by selecting part. Last but not least is an improvement in the display, and of course this 4-band EQ, which I am a big fan of. Talk about an easy way to quickly get a tone and a sound that you're happy with without having to get in and really manipulate minute settings. This is quick, it's easy, it's tactile. Very similar to what Roland has done on the FP60 and the 90, except you've got 4 bands instead of 3. So that's kind of cool. The very last thing I'm going to mention is the control app. If you get the ES920 or the ES820, make sure that you get one with the firmware update. If not, it's very easy for you to do yourself, or you can check with a retailer that you're buying this from for assistance on how to do the firmware upgrade. Because once you do, the Kawai Piano Remote app allows you to control the ES920 from that app. And that app is exactly the same operating environment that controls the CA79, the CA99, and the newest Auras as well. It's super slick, and it combines everything into one. So you've got your virtual technician settings are in there, as well as the remote control functionality is in there. So tons that you can do with that Piano Remote app. Not something that's available to you over here on the ES8. So let's wrap up here. What we have is, 2 instruments that appear to be fairly similar when you're just looking at the broad strokes. But as you dig down into the details, depending on how you intend to use this instrument, we have some really quite meaningful differences between these 2 instruments. And it comes really in the form of the signal processing, speaker quality, and speaker size. And the fact that you've got a redesigned sensor strip. So this is going to be, the reliability is going to be super high compared to some of the past issues that the early ES8s experienced. If you're using this with the onboard speakers often, you would not regret moving to the ES920. And if you ever have an opportunity to be between an ES8 and an ES920 like me right here, comparing them side by side, you're going to be as shocked as I am at just how much those differences manifest in the acoustic experience. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope that this has been useful. If you're in the process of shopping for an instrument kind of in this category, the $2,000 all-in-one portable category, there's some great ones out there on the marketplace. You know, anyone looking at this is probably going to be taking a peek at a Yamaha P515 or a Roland FP60, FP90. You know, if onboard piano tone is top of mind, make sure to check this out. It's pretty good. My name's Stu Harrison. This has been Merriam Pianos on YouTube, and if it's the first time that you've caught us here, we'd really appreciate if you subscribed as well. Hit that notification bell because we would love to see you back for more videos in the future. We're always coming out with them. Take care and have yourself a great day.